lot of you guys were messaging me about recognizing how call-outs are, one person said call-outs are killing your culture, they're killing your school, it's you guys are crushing under the weight of it. So I wanted to kind of share a different angle here. What happens a lot in schools is we are diagnosing the wrong problem. So if your director, right? So let's say you have one center, but even if you have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we work with schools that have a portfolio of companies up to 120 schools are some of the schools that we work with. So if your director had a full day with no interruptions, what would they actually work on? And I know a lot of you are hearing this and you're saying, okay, oh my gosh, like what's a day with no interruptions? What would they actually work on? But the other question is, how often does that day actually happen? Because when we look at the role of a director, right, and what should be happening, whether that's enrollment follow-up, tours, parent relationships, team coaching and development, classroom quality, planning and reporting, these are the things that actually maintain, grow, and stabilize the school. But I want to actually show you where the hijack happens, because this is much deeper than just interruptions. It's a lot deeper than this, actually. When teachers call out, and now you have to make coverage decisions and room shuffling and parent conversations and constant adjustments, by 10 o'clock in the morning, the day is gone, okay? And so on a typical day, your director is spending more hours than she's quantifying dealing with the fallout of the callouts. So let's say conservatively, she's averaging 2 to 3 hours a day just managing the fallout of the coverage, okay? That's not a busy day. Leaders just say things like, well, today was just a busy day. No, this is a role shift. You have shifted this person's role. If they are spending 3 hours a day, or even an hour, 2 hours a day, managing the fallout of callouts, you don't have a director anymore. This is a role shift. Now their job is managing callouts. That's not a job, because now those hours are not spent on actually following up on enrollment, right? You know how many times I speak to owners and they're like, well, my director was supposed to follow up with the tours, but they didn't because someone called out. I'm like, that is money. Team development, retention, parent experience, referrals. And so you think the cost is just payroll. It's not. It is everything that didn't happen that day that was supposed to happen. And some things really do need to happen. So the owner gets pulled in. And again, you become the backstop and the emotional shock absorber and the stabilizer for everything that happens in your school. And so we start to buy an illusion. My director needs better time management. No. Your director does not need better time management. Time management does not solve breakdowns. You don't need better planning. You don't need another conference. You need infrastructure that protects the role of the director. I'm going to say it again. You need infrastructure that protects the role of the director. The director's role is not to manage the fallout of callouts. The director's role is to do all of the things that I said a couple of minutes ago. Right? So right now, your director is the backup system. So if something breaks, they absorb it. If someone calls out, they solve it. If there's pressure, they carry it. Or they carry it until they can't, and then you start carrying that pressure. And this is why I say all day long, is that education, right, does not have infrastructure. It is run on exhaustion. Someone in the building is always exhausted, overwhelmed, burnt out, stretched thin, tired, overwhelmed, can't breathe. That is how schools operate, and it is not sustainable. That is why I wrote my book. This can't be normal. What to do when success starts to feel like survival. It is not normal for a director to be spending 2 hours or 3 hours a day managing the fallout of callouts. It is not normal. There is another way. So callouts are the fastest way that these breakdowns happen, because the pressure is immediate, and when there's no infrastructure, which means there's no pre-decided response of what happens when someone calls out, even when you're short-staffed, even when there's licensing, even when there's a snow day, even when the bug and the flu and all the other insert whatever excuse you want happens. Everything constantly reroutes. So every call out doesn't just cost you coverage, it costs you leadership. It doesn't just cost you coverage, it costs you leadership. So when you have real infrastructure, coverage has an owner, decisions are pre-decided and pressure tested against reality, escalations are clear, and so your director actually does their job even on hard days. Directors stay in their role even on hard days, even when you're short-staffed, even when everyone's not feeling well, even when people are not in the mood, even on a random Tuesday. Directors can stay in their role. We're only at Tuesday. How many times has your director been pulled out of their actual role because of call-outs? Let me know in the comments. How many times has your director been pulled out of their actual role because of call-outs? If the infrastructure that you have requires your director to step in every time something breaks, you don't have a system that holds. You don't, right? And your teachers know that. They know that you cannot enforce the consequence, the point system, whatever it is, because they know that you need them. So you actually don't have consequences for people calling out. So they continue to call out. And this is what I spoke about yesterday, which is threats and bribes only take you so far. You need pre-decided consequences and responses for when people call out. And a consequence is a pre-decided response when someone breaks the standard. Consequence isn't punishment. It's predictable safety. Predictable safety for the organization. When someone calls out, the consequence has to sit in the person that did the call out. What ends up happening right now is the consequence actually sits with you. You're the one that reshuffles the schedule. You're the one that has to figure it out. You're the one that has to rearrange and reshuffle and deal with the fallout. That's not infrastructure. That's a person who gets to keep calling out and still not pay the consequence. Okay? And so, if you want to understand what callouts are costing you, how to stop this from falling on your director and you every single time, and you want an actual solution, my team and I created the call out solution. You can come out, call out, and we will send you information about our call out solution. And what it is we walk you through a very specific training on how to identify where the breakdowns are in your current call-out system. Anyone who's watching this, who's been in business for more than a year or two, you already have some version of a policy or system or process or checklist or SOP, or you fill in the blank of your call-out. It's not working. It works on ideal days. It doesn't work when pressure enters the building, i.e. when you're short-staffed or there's a flu walking around. So you need to understand where your breakdowns are. Then we have the call out cost calculator, which helps, a literal math calculator where you plug in your information and you get to see how much are call outs costing us, right? And then we have a fillable call out standard where you can actually create infrastructure with your call outs. How to write out your standard, who owns it, what is the rhythm to make sure it happens mood proof, no matter what, on every single day, and what's the response? What is the pre-decided consequence when someone breaks the standard? All of that is available for you in the call out solution.